Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation called An Inclusive Rec Center for Every Body. This is going to be an introduction to health at every size, fatphobia, and diet culture. My name is Haley Jones. I am graduating from PSU in about 2 weeks with my master's in counseling. I specialize in working with folks dealing with eating disorders, disordered eating, and anyone who wants to work on their relationship to food, their body, or movement. I'm also a certified body trust provider through Nourished, which means I have a year-long additional certification in working with people dealing with eating disorders and disordered eating. All right, let's get started. So we're going to start with an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. Stage one is going to be gaining an increased understanding of topics including weight stigma, fat phobia, and the health at every size framework. Stage two will be unpacking our own internalized fat phobia and weight stigma. Stage three, looking at our own relationships to body, food, and movement. And then stage four, advocacy efforts and how you can implement this information into your everyday life. A quick note, this presentation will probably challenge a lot of beliefs you may have about food, bodies, and movement. I just invite you to keep an open mind and notice any feelings that come up for you. Those are valid and there's something to pay attention to for sure. So first we're going to start with just some member feedback that was given in the Rec Center's 2020 member survey. And just something to keep in mind is that the survey did not explicitly ask about the experiences of members in larger bodies or about fat phobia and weight stigma. These are all things that folks wrote in on their own in the additional comment section. So starting out, some of the weight room staff were rude and snobby to people who don't look like they belong there. Please hire staff/instructors with more body diversity training. I would like to see intentional inclusion of larger bodies in marketing images and services. For example, a yoga class specifically for people in larger bodies. And then 3 more. I feel weak and unwelcomed in the gym, but I'm forced to pay for it. Totally bad for my emotional well-being. Acceptance and representation of size diversity could use improvement. There's very little for beginner or people of size offered outside of one /mob a year /term that is queer-centered. It's a gym where most people are trying to shape their bodies to fit ideal standards. This is a strange question. So as we can see from the member feedback of the Rec Center survey in 2020, fat phobia and diet culture-based beliefs are having an effect on the people who join the Rec Center and use the services. A lot of times this is probably not intentional by staff members or anyone in the Rec Center, but that doesn't excuse the impact. And as we can see by the member feedback, this is something that is happening and that needs to be addressed, hence this presentation. So moving into just some trauma-informed language about body size and how I will be using languages in this presentation. So instead of the words overweight, underweight, and obese, I will be using person in a larger body or a person in a smaller body. Most important above all of this is to call someone the language that they prefer and that they ask you to use for them. So if you don't know, best idea is to ask someone. And here's just some reasoning why we use these terms. So the terms overweight and underweight imply that there is a set healthy weight that someone can be under or over, rather than accepting that bodies come in a diverse range of shapes, sizes, and weights. So there is not just one weight shift that can happen that suddenly sets you into a healthy weight. Weight is much more nuanced than that. The term overweight implies that you're over some sort of set healthy weight, and that just is not true. That doesn't exist. And then the Latin roots of the word obese mean to eat away or to eat all over. And this implies that a fat person has a certain caloric intake or simply eats more, which is not true and an assumption not supported by science. The fat liberation community also speaks out about not using the word obese, it's considered a medical slur. So yes, it is used in medical settings, but the fat community has come out and said, please don't use this word. It's considered a slur. It's pathologizing being in a larger body when it's not a pathology, which we will get into further in this presentation. So in an evidence review of 20 studies, 75% of the papers found evidence of weight bias among exercise professionals. This was according to data published in a 2008 study. People who experience weight stigma quickly become much less willing and desiring to participate in physical activity, regardless of their actual weight. So this is true for people in smaller and larger bodies. But this really just showcases that weight bias is a problem, definitely among exercise professionals, and really among the general public. And the impacts of it are people are less likely to want to come to a place like the rec center. And again, regardless of their actual weight. So moving into implicit bias. Implicit bias is unconscious. So it is the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions. And super important to remember that this is all unconscious. So implicit biases are something that we all have, whether you're aware of them or not. And how they work is that we tend to favor the group that we share an identity with. So if we are thin, we have an unconscious tendency to prefer thin people. If we're tall, same goes for tall people. So it's important to remember, again, like I said, this is unconscious, happening whether we're aware of it or not. And the hope with this presentation is that you'll begin to bring some awareness to those implicit biases. And the awareness is the first step in working on these biases and unlearning them. If you would like to check out a link here at the bottom of the page, we have from S.J. Thompson an expressive writing prompt for fatphobia and weight bias. This can be a really helpful way to notice and see what your biases are, engage in this prompt. Definitely check it out. So weight discrimination. On the right here, we have an image of the United States. The states in blue are the states that have weight discrimination laws. So just looking at this graphic, we can see that most states do not have any weight discrimination laws, which means it's legal to discriminate against people in larger bodies. And unfortunately, that actually happens all the time. So here on the left, we can see some examples of that discrimination are that people in larger bodies are less likely to be hired for a job than an identical counterpart whose only difference is they're in a smaller body. Individuals in larger bodies also make less money per year than someone with an identical skill set. Again, the only difference being that they're in a larger body. And then along the bottom is something to keep in mind while we go through this is that we all have internalized fat phobia because we live in a fat phobic culture that scrutinizes and dehumanizes people in fat bodies on a daily basis. And as you can see by those examples, it's systemic and it's happening even within our laws. So if you notice your own internalized fat phobia, that doesn't mean you're a bad person or anything's wrong with you. It's a normal byproduct of living in a culture where fat phobia is so normalized. And then we have weight stigma. So weight stigma is negative weight-related attitudes and beliefs that manifest as things like stereotypes, rejection, prejudice, and discrimination. Weight stigma has been shown by a whole lot of research that it poses a really significant threat to psychological and physical health. It's been documented as a significant risk factor for eating disorders, depression, body dissatisfaction, low self-esteem, anxiety, a whole bunch of mental health struggles. And the research shows that discrimination increases the higher a person's body weight is. So weight stigma is kind of like on a sliding scale where it goes up the larger of a body size that you're in. And then we have diet culture. So this is a big one. Diet culture is very insidious. What is diet culture? So diet culture is a system of belief that promotes weight loss as a means of attaining higher status. So that's like the idea that you're a better person, you're more worthy, you're more beautiful. if you lose weight or if you're in a smaller body. Diet culture worships thinness and equates it to health and moral virtue. So that's the assumption that thin equals healthy, or thin equals a better person, a smarter person, anyone with like a higher moral virtue. In the US, the weight loss and wellness industry is worth $66 billion. That's a huge amount of money. So that means a lot of people are making a lot of money off of selling us weight loss products, diet programs, that sort of thing. Diet culture demonizes certain ways of eating while elevating others. So this can be seen as labeling foods good versus bad, clean versus dirty, healthy versus unhealthy. It's a very like black and white way of thinking about food, where one way is better than the other. And then diet culture oppresses people who don't match up with its supposed picture of health, which disproportionately harms anyone with an oppressed identity, including women, femmes, trans folks, people in larger bodies, people of color, disabled folks, and all of this damages both mental and physical health. It has some pretty bad effects. So some examples of diet culture are, of course, dieting, bad diet, lifestyle changes. So diet culture is a shapeshifter. It goes by a lot of different things. The term dieting has lost a lot of popularity in probably the last 10 years. So a lot of brands have rebranded to say things like lifestyle change, or we're about body positivity, or this isn't a diet. There's so many sorts of names, but they'll basically not use dieting, but really it's a diet. Weight Watchers, diet foods, quote unquote superfoods, weight loss challenges, before and after pictures, talking about diets in the break room, a preference for people in thin bodies, etc. Diet culture encompasses a lot of things. And once you start learning about it and noticing it, you'll see that it comes up in so many different areas of our life. I feel like I hear a comment or a phrase rooted in diet culture nearly every day, from someone at the dog park to someone online. So moving on to healthism. Healthism is the preoccupation with personal health as a primary, often the primary focus for the definition and achievement of well-being. A goal which, in terms of healthism, is often framed as being attained primarily through the modification of lifestyles. So that means like what you eat, how much or how little movement you get, things that are within your control. Healthism sees health as the property and responsibility of the individual. So that means it's seen as like a very individualistic thing that you're supposed to do by yourself. If you're not doing it right, it's your fault. You need to do it by yourself, essentially. And it ranks the personal pursuit of health above everything else. So that means like health is seen as almost like the be all end all. Like you must be pursuing health, or you're a bad person, or you're not deserving of respect, or those sorts of things. Healthism ignores the impact of poverty, oppression, war, violence, luck, historical atrocities, abuse, the environment, and trauma on health outcomes, which actually, as we'll go into in the next slide, have a huge impact on health outcomes. Healthism protects the status quo, it leads to victim blaming and privilege, it increases health inequalities, and it fosters internalized oppression. So it makes people feel really bad about themselves. And specifically those with oppressed identities, more so. And then a big one, it judges people's worth according to their health status. So it's like this idea that you are a better person, you're more worthy if you are striving for these very specific ways of viewing health or health status. Why is healthism not a good thing? Well, it ignores a lot of things, as we've covered. Some people will never be healthy. Some people live with chronic illnesses, for just one example. Our ideas of what is healthy is not achievable by all people, and that doesn't mean they shouldn't be worthy of respect or care or love, or not being treated in a way that fosters internalized oppression. Healthism it's sneaky too. It's definitely a shapeshifter. A lot of times it can masquerade as things that are not diet culture. Another big thing that comes up is people do not owe you healthiness. No one has to make attempts at achieving health, which, yeah, that's an important one. So check out these recommended readings for sure on the right. Healthism is a really big topic, and I think it's important to read more about it because there's a lot to say, and I definitely can't go over it in one slide. If you just even read one of them, the 11 reasons your phony concerns for fast health has got to stop. It's a great article to check out. So moving on to the social determinants of health. There are a whole bunch of studies on the social determinants of health, and they link health outcomes primarily to these social determinants. So these determinants include discrimination, so the identities we hold. Are we discriminated against? Cultural stigmas, job status or class, so how much money we have, access or no access to healthcare, history of trauma or abuse, that's a really big one, social connectivity, so do we feel connected to other people, and then stress load over a lifetime, so how much stress we're dealing with on a daily basis. A quote that really stuck out to me from the book Anti-Diet by Christy, which is a great read, is that what we eat, how much or how little we move, and other lifestyle choices we make account for less than 10% of our health. That's very striking to me. So that means 90% of health outcomes have to do with the social determinants. So do we face discrimination? What kind? What's our stress level? Do we have access to healthcare? Are we living in poverty? How much money do we have? That sort of thing. Do we have a history of trauma? So definitely something to consider when we consider our culture's view of health and how we're supposed to try to achieve it. It actually accounts for so much less than we might believe. A great article down here on the bottom, 5 theories that prove health is constructive. Highly recommend reading that. It has lots of links to the studies around social determinants and goes into this topic quite a bit deeper. Here we have an image from Instagram, the account Your Fat Friend. It says, we are replacing a beauty standard with a health standard that is just as fickle, just as relentless, and just as out of reach for many of us. So what that means to me is that, yeah, we're replacing beauty standards with health standards. So the first thing that comes to mind is a quote I see on Instagram, strong is the new skinny. That's essentially replacing beauty standards with health standards that are just as relentless, again, just as fickle and just as out of reach for so many people. And again, people don't owe you health. If someone doesn't want to work out or engage in activities that might make them strong, that's not on us to police or judge or harm others around. It's a personal choice, and as we saw by the social determinants of health slide, it really has such a small impact on overall health outcomes. Check out the podcast on the left. It goes much more into healthism and fatphobia and how they're linked. And then the link on the right about Your Fat Friends, another great article about the realities of a life as a very fat person. So you get to hear this person's firsthand perspective, which is really important. All right, moving into debunking some common weight and health myths. Like I said, this presentation is probably going to bring up a lot of feelings for you. It might challenge some long and deeply held beliefs about weight and food and movement. But it's asking you to notice what feelings are coming up for you. Try to keep an open mind. If it makes you angry or irritated, notice that. It makes sense. These are very common myths that we are sold from the media, oftentimes doctors and medical professionals, from so many different angles. So it makes sense that this is shocking or new information. So a lot of research has gone into this statistic, and it is that 95% of diets, also known as intentional weight loss attempts, fail. This means that for 95% of people who engage in an intentional weight loss attempt, they will initially lose weight and then gain it all back, oftentimes more than they initially lost. As we can see in that little bullet point underneath, there was a 29 study meta-analysis, which means They analyzed 29 different separate studies, and they found that participants in structured weight loss regimes, so intentional weight loss attempts, regained the majority of the weight they lost after the 5-year mark. So you can actually find a lot of research that supposedly debunks the statistic, but the thing is, most weight loss research doesn't go as far out as the 5-year mark. A lot of times they'll only look at 30 days, 6 months, 1 year. And yeah, in that amount of time, people do lose weight. But when you look at this meta-analysis, we can see that they almost always, 95% of the time, gain it all back. So there are no long-term studies that provide evidence for successful long-term weight loss. Absolutely none. There's a bunch out there that prove it for a short amount of time, but again, that's not looking past the 5-year mark. And then a very shocking and striking and concerning statistic is that 1 in 4 diets, also known as intentional weight loss attempts, will develop into a full-blown eating disorder. And that is a statistic by the National Eating Disorder Association. So that means 25% of people who engage in dieting or weight loss behaviors will develop an eating disorder. And eating disorders actually have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness, which means a lot of people die from eating disorders. So it makes it even that much more concerning. Moving on to the second pink bullet point, despite the widely held belief that a higher body mass index causes poor health, research does not support this link. Individuals in the quote-unquote overweight category actually have the lowest mortality rate, which means they live the longest and have the best health outcomes. So that's probably pretty shocking to a lot of people. I know that's not something I knew, I don't know, like 5 years ago. So this essentially means that being in a larger body is not bad for you. It doesn't necessarily cause poor health, just as being in a smaller body does not necessarily mean you have good health. Bodies come in a wide range of sizes, and you can be healthy or unhealthy at any body size. And then the bottom bullet point, weight cycling is directly related to compromised health, including higher mortality, osteoporotic fractures, gallstone attacks, loss of muscle tissue, hypertension, chronic inflammation, and even cancer. So weight cycling is what happens when you engage in diets or intentional weight loss attempts. You initially lose weight, for the most part, often, and then that gaining it all back, which happens to 95% of folks, that going up and down with your weight is related to all these negative health outcomes. So we can really see how dieting is dangerous by looking at all these statistics, how for the most part, 95% of folks gain it all back, and then weight cycling, that going up and down and going on a diet and coming off of it isn't good for our health. It's not good for us. Yeah, it's bad for us. And then, I don't know, that one thing is so striking to me about how higher BMI does not cause poor health. I think that's definitely something to highlight. All right, that same statistic again, 1 in 4 diets, also known as intentional weight loss attempts, develop into an eating disorder. Very striking. And then on the right, we have a graphic, which is weight management almost versus eating disorders. Under the weight management side, we can see how someone is tracking everybody's food, weighing themselves daily, exercise to compensate for quote unquote overeating, and restricting food groups. When it's considered weight management, it's applauded. Again, we can look on the right, it's all the same behaviors, but it's called an eating disorder and it's diagnosed. Oftentimes, the folks who get diagnosed with the eating disorders are in a smaller body, where the weight management side folks are in a larger body, when it's essentially the same behaviors and should be seen as an eating disorder across the board. But one is promoted and applauded, where one is diagnosed and seen as a pathology. So definitely something to consider. Those same behaviors, exact same thing, looks that totally different depending on someone's body size. So here's a quote from the National Eating Disorder Association. Since the rise of national obesity prevention campaigns, the incidence of weight stigma has increased about 66%. So efforts to combat obesity are well-intentioned, the research is clear. The overemphasis of weight and the value our culture places on fitness encourages disordered eating, body shame, and negatively affects health outcomes. So that's really striking. So since the rise of all these campaigns to quote unquote fight obesity have come out, weight stigma has gone up a whole lot, 66%. And as we talked about in previous slides, weight stigma leads to eating disorders, disordered eating, depression, anxiety, body shame. It negatively affects our health. It's a stress. To be discriminated against because of an identity you hold is stressful. It doesn't feel good. It's scary. Like we saw in previous slides, it means you're less likely to get a job. That means you're less likely to have money, etc. So something to think about, because these campaigns are everywhere. So now we're going to look at fatphobia and diet culture in the PSU rec center environment specifically, and what that could look like. The first one is assuming that members in larger bodies are out of shape, need lower intensity modifications, don't know their way around the rec center, or don't know how to use the equipment. It's just not true. People in larger bodies can be in shape, know what they're doing in the gym. They might need the hardest modifications. These things are not dependent on body size. It's dependent on the individual. Another fatphobic rooted thing is number 2, unsolicited praise, like you're so brave, you inspire me, keep at it, simply because someone in a larger body is working out or existing. This is rooted in the belief that it's inspirational or a good thing for someone in a larger body to be working out or existing, and you wouldn't say that to someone in a smaller body, so it's not okay to say to someone in a larger body. That really links up to number 3, assuming that a member at the rec center or a gym is in a larger body is at the rec center to solve the problem of their fatness. Being in a larger body, being fat, it's not a problem. It's not something to solve. If someone's at the rec center, it's not necessarily to lose weight. Number 4, this might bring up a lot of feelings, but congratulating weight loss. This happens all the time. So congratulating weight loss reinforces belief that thin equals healthy, more attractive, or better, which is simply not true. You can be healthy at any body size, and again, people don't owe you health, so there's that piece too. Someone in a smaller body is not more attractive, and someone in a smaller body is not better than someone in a larger body. So congratulating weight loss really reinforces all those beliefs rooted in fatphobia. Fatphobic language to describe workouts, you probably see this all the time, things like fat blasting, waist whittling, push harder and earn your cheat day, get your bikini body ready. All that language is rooted in the idea that we need to earn our food, burn off fat, that people in larger bodies shouldn't be wearing bikinis, or that we need to look a certain way to be in a swimsuit, which is just not true. And then number 6, labeling foods as good, bad, healthy and unhealthy, clean or dirty. This is rooted in diet culture and the belief there's some foods that are better than others, there's some foods that are worse than others, and it's just not true. Food has different ratios of calories and nutrients, but food is more than that. Food is culture, food is socializing, food is pleasure, food is fun. Food can even be coping. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Eating one type of food does not make you a better or worse person. Eating, I don't know, a cheeseburger and fries is not morally worse than eating a salad for lunch. They're just different types of foods. So now we're going to move into the weight inclusive paradigm. So these are different approaches and different ways of looking at relationships with food, body, and movement. We got health at every size, intuitive eating, fat liberation, and inclusive service. So here's a quote from the article by Tylka, 2014. I definitely recommend checking this article if you want to dive into some of the research about weight, body size, and a weight inclusive approach. There is considerable evidence that a focus on weight and weight loss is linked to diminished health. Very striking. It's true. Focusing on weight and weight loss is linked to diminished health. We talked about it. It's linked to eating disorders, disordered eating, depression, anxiety, etc. What we really should be focusing on is relationship to food, body, and movement, and what that relationship looks like, how you feel about food, how you feel about movement, how you feel about exercise. not necessarily weight or weight loss. All right, so moving into the first paradigm, we're going to talk a lot about health at every size. Health at Every Size is also a book by Lindo and Lucy Aphramor, which I highly recommend reading. Their newest book is Body Respect, which I recommend reading both. If you can only read one, I would go with Body Respect. So Health at Every Size principles help us advance social justice, create an inclusive and respectful community, and support people of all sizes in finding compassionate ways to take care of themselves. If you want to read more about it, you can click those little X's at the end of the sentence. The 3 principles of Health at Every Size, or HAZE, are respect, critical awareness, and compassionate self-care. And we'll go a little bit more into those on the following slides. So first we have respect. Respect means that we celebrate body diversity. We honor the differences in size, age, race, ethnicity, gender, ability or disability, sexual orientation, religion, class, and other human attributes. This means that we respect people regardless of differences in identity, and that includes body size. We respect someone in a larger body, in a smaller body, and there's no cutoff to that. We respect someone in a super large body, we respect someone in a very small body. There's no size cutoff or weight limit for respect. It just needs to happen across the board. And then we have critical awareness. This is a very important piece. This is a lot of what this presentation is. So it's challenging scientific and cultural assumptions and valuing body knowledge and lived experience. So that means that we're going to really dive deep into the research out there on weight loss and diet, look at who's funding them, look at who's making money off of them, looking at alternative paradigms like Health at Every Size or the weight inclusive approach. And most importantly, it's valuing body knowledge and lived experience. So I really urge you to follow Instagram accounts, follow social media accounts by people in larger bodies, by fat people. Read their experiences with weight stigma and fatphobia, because it harms a lot of people. It does a lot of damage, and it's so common too. So definitely check out Your Fat Friend. That's one of my favorite accounts, since they specifically write a lot about their life as a very fat person living in this culture. And then number 3 is compassionate self-care. So engaging in movement that centers pleasure and enjoyment rather than punishment or to change one's body. So this means checking your intentions around engaging in movement or exercise. Why are you doing it? Is it because it feels good and you love it or enjoy it? Or is it because you're punishing yourself for trying to change your body? That is what I would consider disordered if someone was wanting to work with me in terms of therapy for punishment or to change your body. And what I would do with folks is work on changing that to engaging in movement for pleasure or for enjoyment. And the same compassionate self-care goes with food as well. Eating in a flexible, attuned manner that values pleasure and honors internal cues of hunger. So noticing when you're hungry, when you're full. Satiety and appetite. So does it feel satisfying? Does it taste good? What do I like to eat? We're respecting the social conditions that frame eating options. So a huge thing that comes into play when we think about what we eat is money. Food is expensive. A lot of times we eat what we can afford. A lot of times we can't afford certain quote unquote superfoods or organic foods, and that's fine. We all need food, we all need to eat, and there's no moral value attached to food. Like I said, a cheeseburger, same moral value as an apple. So here's a really common question. This is from the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health website. I highly recommend checking out that website, but we'll go over this question. Principle 1 of Health at Every Size states that no weight should be pathologized. But aren't there pathological weights, such as an adult of 68 pounds with an eating disorder or a 600-pound bedridden individual? So the answer to that on the screen, but I'll go into a little bit as well. What the HAZE approach does is we're shifting that focus from acknowledging and respecting individual circumstances and working to investigate and support options that are available to them, from that rather more like weight-focused approach, where we just be focusing on their weight. We're focusing on their relationship to food, we're focusing on their circumstances, we're focusing on their health and well-being. So the HAZE approach really puts that focus on their behaviors, their unique set of abilities, their available resources, and places them in the context of their life as the primary or the concern and consideration. So improving a person's health is a process that begins by contemplating what it would take to make certain determinants of health available to them. So things like access to healthcare, access to a place to move, access to certain types of food. Not by pathologizing any specific weight. By pathologizing any specific weight, we're doing harm. Again, focusing on weight and weight loss does result in diminished health outcomes. It doesn't help anyone. So no weight should be pathologized in any case, regardless of weight. Now moving on to looking inward. So those of us who grew up in Western culture have been raised in a fat-phobic society. It's the water we swim in, it's all around us. That means that we have all internalized fat-phobic and diet culture-based beliefs. Doesn't mean we're bad people, doesn't mean anything's wrong with us. It's just, if you grew up in Western culture, you've been around it your entire life. It's in our media, it's everywhere. So some things to consider. Consider the ways in which you have and or do perpetuate fat phobia and diet culture. Maybe some of the things we covered in the past slide, you're realizing, oh, I do that, or I talk about those things. Just notice that. Try to notice it without any judgment. What comes up for you? How has fat phobia impacted your relationship to your body, movement, and food? Most likely it has. So think back to childhood. Moving on to the second question, what did your caregiver's relationship to their body, food, and movement look like? A lot of times our relationships to body, food, and movement get passed down generationally. So you might notice you have some of the same relationships to those things as maybe a caregiver or a great grandparent or an aunt or uncle or whoever maybe have raised you. So yeah, those are all things to unpack and really think about. There's probably a lot you could, consider in terms of those questions. So now we're going to look at this handout, the diet versus non-diet approach. This is where you can really dive deep in looking at your own relationships to exercise, food, and views of progress, and just see, am I on the diet mentality side or more leaning towards non-diet mentality? So in terms of eating and food choices, a diet mentality approach would look like, do I deserve this food? If I eat a heavy food, quote unquote heavy, I try to find a way to make up for it. I feel guilty when I eat quote unquote heavy food. I usually describe a day of eating as either good or bad. I view food as the enemy. Where a non-diet mentality approach would look like questions including, am I hungry? Do I want it? Will I be deprived if I don't eat it? Will it be satisfying? Does it taste good? I deserve to enjoy eating without guilt. So a really different approach there. Exercise, a diet mentality approach would focus primarily on calories burned or feeling guilty if you missed a day of exercise, where a non-diet approach would more be focusing on the joy and pleasure of engaging in movement. What does it bring to your life? What does it add to your life? What do you enjoy about it? Or do you enjoy it? Because you don't have to engage in exercise if you don't want to. View of progress, that's going to look a lot different on each side. So diet mentality, more like how many pounds have I lost? How do I look? What do other people think of me? Trying to have good willpower. Where non-diet approach would look like recognizing inner body cues of hunger and fullness and pleasure and what tastes good. Trusting yourself around food to eat what you want when you want. Letting go of eating indiscretions. And rather than being consumed with your weight, trusting that your weight will normalize when you attune to your internal eating signals. And remembering that weight is not a primary goal or an indicator of progress. Your body size is your body size. We come in all different sizes. Being in a smaller body is not morally better than being in a larger body. This handout was from the book Intuitive Eating. I highly recommend it. It's by Evelyn, Tribole, and Elyse Resch. They also have a really great book called the Intuitive Eating Workbook. So if you want to dive deeper into this, definitely check out those two books. The workbook is a great start. And now talking about implementing Hayes principles into your life. Number one, avoid commenting on other people's bodies, especially if it's unsolicited or you didn't ask for consent to comment on their bodies. This kind of goes back to not congratulating weight loss because it's not better to be in a smaller body. And another point, you don't know how someone lost weight. So there's eating disorder, an illness, a chronic illness, you don't know. Really try to stop engaging in weight loss or diet talk when others are around. This promotes the idea that losing weight is or being in a smaller body is morally better. This promotes dieting and diet culture, which again, we saw how 1 in 4 diets develops into an eating disorder. Weight loss and diet talk is also really triggering for folks with eating disorders or wanting to work on their relationship with food. So if you can engage in that in private, that is really helpful for a lot of folks. You can focus on your relationship to movement, food in your body rather than weight loss, or body size. Most of us, I would say all of us, have room to work on our relationship to movement, food in their bodies, and that can start with this presentation. Work on appreciating that bodies naturally come in a variety of shapes and sizes, and ensure the optimal health and well-being is provided to everyone, regardless of their weight. So one way you can do this that I actually encourage my clients to do is follow a bunch of different people on social media in different body sizes. On the TV and Netflix and I don't know, TV basically. We tend to see bodies that look very similar. So smaller bodies, white bodies, people that are able-bodied, straight, cisgender. So by following people of all different shapes, sizes, genders, sexualities on social media, we can start to appreciate that bodies do come in many different sizes. And there's actually research on that by following people of all different shapes and sizes, we actually can improve our own body shame or feelings about our body. And then number 5, trust that people move towards greater health and given access to stigma-free opportunities. So places like gyms with equipment for people of all sizes, trainers that focus on things other than weight and weight loss, access to providers that are not focused on weight or weight loss, that sort of thing. Number 6, checking your own fat phobia and investment into diet culture. We all have implicit bias. This is an ongoing process of unlearning. So another way that you can check your implicit bias is look up the Harvard MIT. They have a little quiz type thing where you click some buttons and it shows your implicit bias levels in terms of weight if you click the weight one. So it's definitely something to check out, and that can help you start to become more aware of your own fat phobia. Don't give unsolicited praise to anybody, and here it says specifically if people in larger bodies, things like encouraging someone in a larger body for engaging in movement. It's not okay, it's patronizing. Don't do it. Don't make assumptions about individuals based on body size. You don't know someone's health status or relationship with food or a whole lot of things based on their body size. And then wherever you can, work to ensure that inclusive seating is available for all, so especially seats that don't have sides. Someone of any body size can sit in it, and it can hold a variety of weights. So we've reached the end of the presentation. Thanks for listening. I have a whole bunch more resources here that you can check out. You can click the link that I'll include here and below for a whole list of podcast books and so on. Some of the recommended ones I have are Body or Sex by Lindo and Elyse Aphramor, Health at Every Size by them as well. The No More Waiting e-course by Nourished is a 6-week course where you can unpack a lot of this stuff in much more detail, and with a group of people, there's a conversation board as well. Definitely check out Intuitive Eating or the Intuitive Eating Workbook. The workbook is really great if you want to work through some of these things in your relationship with food, your body, and movement. Fearing the Black Body, the Racial Origins of Fat Phobia. So fat phobia is really rooted in racism, and this is a great book to unpack that. Anti-Diet by Christy goes over the history of diet culture and how it's changed throughout time and what it looks like now and how much money it makes. Great read. The Body is Not an Apology. Highly recommend that one by Sonya Renee Taylor. Sonya Renee Taylor also has a website with a whole lot of great articles about fat phobia and oppression and stigma that you should check out. The Food Psych podcast is a free resource. It's a great podcast. Tons of different episodes on these same topics. Highly recommend. The Effort Diet by Carolyn Dooner. That's a great one. And then the Association for Size Diversity and Health, or ASDA. You can find a whole lot of information about size diversity and health. So thank you for coming, and I hope that this was helpful and brought up a lot of things for you. Again, notice what feelings are coming up for you. Whatever they are, they're valid. If you're irritated or angry, that makes sense. This is a lot of new info, and it challenges a lot of commonly held beliefs around food, health, movement, and exercise. So I definitely urge you to check out more resources, read more information, look at the research, whatever works for you. All right, bye.